Hey, welcome to The Dangerous Maybe. I'm Mikey. And on today's episode, I want to talk at length about Jacques Lacan's concept of the Oedipus Complex. Now, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on background, context, or any stuff like that, but there's a few things that need to be stated up front. And the most important is that Lacan believed, like Freud, that the Oedipus Complex has a very central role to play in the psychological development of a human being. And so he has that in common with Freud. But besides that, Lacan diverges on almost all points in the Oedipus Complex. He turns things around. He makes certain things that Freud believed that were literal to be symbolic. And so what we're going to see is a radically new concept of the Oedipus Complex emerge from Lacan's thought. I think one of the most interesting and important aspects of Lacan's concept of the Oedipus Complex, there's a tongue twister, is that his concepts within it are far more phenomenologically verifiable than Freud's. I think as we go through each concept step by step, you're going to see that despite how his language is very abstract, what he's talking about is far more grounded in everyday experience than what Freud had to say about it. Now, early on, around the time of 1938, Lacan still very, very much was a Freudian in his interpretation of the complex. The only difference early on for Lacan was that the Oedipus Complex is historical and it's cultural, whereas for Freud it was always a universal structure. It was something that applied to all human beings across all cultures. So to understand what the fuck Lacan thinks of the Oedipus Complex, we have to understand the three fathers. For Lacan, there are three fathers, and each one corresponds to one of his registers, which is to say there's an imaginary father, there's a symbolic father, and there's a real father. Now, I haven't discussed these registers or these orders in my previous video, but simply put, in this case, we can think of the real father as an actual father, your actual biological father, or an actual father figure. The imaginary father is something like an ideal image we have of a father as either a radical protector and provider, which would be a good ideal image of the father, or there's the negative ideal image of the father too, which is, a good example of this negative image is provided to us by Kafka in his short story called The Judgment, where you have this radically masculine picture of a father who just sits in judgment over you. And something like that is kind of what we would talk about the negative image, or the negative ideal image of the father being. Now, probably the greatest example that comes to mind of the imaginary father in both a positive ideal form and a negative ideal form would be the God of the Bible, Yahweh. There's passages in the Psalms where God is, he's prayed to as the ultimate support, the ultimate help in times of need. He's always referred to as God the Father for this reason, and yet there's all the other passages in the Bible where God is a destroyer and the ultimate judge. And so in some sense, Yahweh both embodies the negative ideal and the positive ideal of the imaginary father. And so finally, the symbolic father, though, is something completely different. And what the symbolic father turns out to be for Lacan is it's a function. It's the law, it's the signifier, as he would call it, the primary signifier in some sense. And this symbolic father is the one that actually has the most important role to play in our development as subjects. But for now, let me hold off on any more discussion of the symbolic father, because it's a concept that we can only understand once we put it in this framework of these other Lacanian concepts. We have to understand the phallus, we have to understand castration, we have to understand all these other things before the symbolic father is really understood. So just for a slight review and a clarification, for Freud, the Oedipus Complex worked like this. It was something that a child went through around the ages of 3 to 5, somewhere in between there. And what happened was, a boy would end up entering into a rivalry with his father while desiring his mother. The father gets in the way of the boy having the mother all to himself, and so he has this type of rivalry with his actual father. Whereas a girl, it's the reverse. The mother's in the way of her having her dad, and so the daughter enters into a rivalry with the mother and desires the father. But Lacan says this is wrong, and he says that actually, during the Oedipus Complex, all children desire their mothers and have a type of rivalry with the father. Even though it's not necessarily the real father, it can be the symbolic father. So just to clarify, for Freud, during the Oedipus Complex, boys desire their mothers and have a rivalry with their fathers, whereas girls desire their fathers and have a rivalry with their mothers. But for Lacan, it's totally different. All kids, all babies during the Oedipus Complex desire their mothers and have a struggle with the father, whether it be the real father or the symbolic father. So for Lacan, the Oedipus Complex is comprised of 3 Oedipal times. Time 1, time 2, time 3. And what happens, there's a structural development at each time in the Oedipus Complex for Lacan. So here's the most general picture of what's going on. Before the Oedipus Complex begins, a baby forms a type of unity with its mother. There's no real division between mother and baby while the breastfeeding is taking place. All the child's needs are met, relatively quick. For the most part, the baby's needs are met immediately at this point in its life. But as the child develops, around the age of 3, what happens is the mother's attention ends up getting focused on other things in the world. And the mother's not just focusing all of her attention on the child. This perplexes the child at this point. And the child starts theorizing. I had mom all to myself, there was this union, but now she's gone, and how do I explain her absence? Why does she leave me? Am I not enough to satisfy her desire? So what the baby posits is the hypothesis of the phallus. Now, you hear the word phallus and immediately you think of a phallic symbol or a literal penis, but that is not what Lacan means here. He talks about the imaginary phallus, and the imaginary phallus is the one that plays the most important role in the Oedipus Complex for Lacan. What it is the idea of an X. It's the unknown object that satisfies mommy's desire. It's what completes her, it's what makes her whole. And so this is what the baby starts to think when the mother becomes absent in its life, is that, oh, mom's gone to go be with the phallus. And because of that, the baby wants the unity it's had with its mother in the pre-Oedipal phase. And so the baby wants to be the phallus for the mother. And in this sense, what the baby wants is to form a union again, to have no differentiations or no otherness. It just wants to be completely whole, completely identical to itself and the mother in this pre-Oedipal unity. And it posits the phallus to make sense of the loss of the mother, the loss of the maternal body as the baby develops. So just for the sake of clarification, I want to say right now that the imaginary phallus is the phallus that plays the central role in the Oedipus complex. Because I mentioned the 3 fathers, it's only natural to think, well, what's the symbolic phallus and what's the real phallus? Obviously, the real phallus would be a penis. The symbolic phallus, that's a complicated issue, and that's something I plan on dealing with in another video. And to discuss it here would be too much of a divergence. And since it's not of central importance to the Oedipus complex, we don't really need to worry about the real phallus and the symbolic phallus. We just need to focus on the imaginary phallus for now. This is where you have a change in Lacan's concept of the complex and that of Freud's. For Freud, it was the literal penis that played this important role in the Oedipus complex, and Lacan is saying no, that's not the case. It's the imaginary phallus. And again, there's other ways you can talk about it. You could say that the imaginary phallus is a kind of perfect thing, a perfect object, a source of plenitude, of potency, and for that reason, the phallus serves as a signifier of lack. It gives a baby a sense of not being complete, and this sense of lack or incompletion is only going to become more intense as the baby goes through the Oedipus complex. So right now, it's almost like a flicker of lack, and the point is, though, this lack is what gives rise to desire. If you don't lack anything, if you're totally and absolutely complete, you don't have any desire. Desire arises from lack. And so desire is a central concept in Lacan's thinking, and here's where we start to see it emerge in the proto-subject. For Lacan, desire is a fundamental concept in all of his thinking. He's always clarifying what desire is and how it functions and the structure of it. And what we see here in the Oedipus complex is how desire begins to emerge and form a subject in the Lacanian sense. And it all starts with the absence of the mother and the hypothesis of the phallus in the Oedipus complex. Let's go through the 3 Oedipal times and see what the main function is or the main event is in each one. What we have in time 1 is the changeover from the mother-child dyad or unity into what Lacan called the pre-Oedipal triangle, which is mother-child phallus. So this is the transition, the time period in which we move from the euphoric joy and sense of unity in the pre-Oedipal relationship with one's mother into the back and forth of feeling like there's something else she desires, there's something you lack and you're not complete. So this is where the pre-Oedipal triangle emerges. Time 2. This is the time in the Oedipus complex where the mother becomes castrated. There's the castration of the mother and the castration of the child or the subject. So we have to understand in what sense the mother becomes castrated. What happens in time 2 is that the mother gets castrated. And what this amounts to saying is that the mother's desire to be with her child all the time gets blocked. And it gets blocked by what Lacan calls the symbolic father, or the name of the father. And that seems very abstract. It's not clear by the term itself what that means. But basically, it's just the law. Another name for the symbolic father and the name of the father is the law. And what's going on here is that societal norms, the structure of society, all these types of things, make it where the mother and the child can't be together all the time. And the mother has a job, she has friends, she has other responsibilities, and so her desire to be with her child gets blocked by these social structures. And in a sense, she becomes forbidden by the name of the father, this function of societal norms and standards imposing itself on her relationship with her child and making it where she can't be with the child all the time. What we have to think of here is the name of the father, the one that castrates the mother, and as we'll see, castrates the child, isn't necessarily an actual father or father figure. It's something as simple as mom has to go to work now. That, her saying that to the child is the name of the father. I can't be with you right now. And that can't, that I have something else to do, that there's a certain otherness in it. It's almost as if she's saying, I want to be with you, but because of this other thing, I can't right now. And this is where the child starts to have a relationship with society as a whole. The big other, as Lacan calls it, is in the mother being forbidden, so to speak, from forming this unity with the child all the time. The main idea here is that in time 2, the child comes to understand that the mom can never fully be completed. It can never, the mother can never have the phallus and have the complete satisfaction of her desire met. It's just impossible. Time 3 is when the child gets castrated by the name of the father or the symbolic father. What happens here is that the child in time 2 realizes that the mother is castrated, that she's essentially a lack, a void, that's never going to be filled or completed. And the name of the father, when a mother says, I can't be with you right now, or I have to go to church right now, or I've got to go help your grandmother right now, whatever it is, this serves to castrate the child. The child in this, and again, this isn't necessarily a one-time event. The castration of both happens over a period of time. It's not like, bam, this is the instance of the mother, the castration of the mother, or the castration of the baby. It's an event that happens over maybe many months. But the castration of the child is when the child becomes blocked from having the mother. The child on some level realizes that it is a lack, that it cannot be the phallus for the mother cannot be the phallus for it, that neither one of them will ever fully be able to satisfy the other's desire. Both of them are desiring beings and in their very structure, and that this sense of unity it had as a baby is something it's not going to get anymore, that it's barred from, it's blocked from. And the central idea here is that the name of the father as a signifier, and when you put it in the singular, it's confusing. When you say, when the mother says, I can't spend time with you right now, I have to go to work, we can say that all of that was a signifier, but it's a group of signifiers. But when Lacan speaks about the name of the father, or the symbolic father, this is what he has in mind. And this type of signification, when you say, I can't because X, is when the baby realizes that that the mother doesn't belong to him or her. In some sense, the mother belongs to the other, to the symbolic father, to society, to social norms and practices as a whole. And in this sense, the phallus, the only one who has the phallus then, on some level, is the name of the father. It's as if society is the authority, or the one who has the sense of fullness and potency, and neither the mother or the child have it. And the name of the father doesn't give the phallus, he doesn't exchange the phallus, and so it's something the baby has to realize it's never going to have, and the mother's never going to have, and that is the castration of the child. The recognition of the sense, it's the recognition of the loss of the sense of unity and completeness and fullness the child had during the pre-Oedipal phase.
Psychoanalysts are really just really well-paid perverts sometimes.